What's good? What's good, everyone? Y'all know what it is. This is Gerald O. 11 Green with a special installment of the HBCU Fanatics show. I got my boy
No, no, no,
Coach
no.
67.
No. I don't mean to cut you off, bro. A
Correct?
special HBCU Fanatics edition of the Southern Baller Show.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Special edition. So we've had this show and on the fence for a little bit due to personal obligations. So we got a chance to do it. Um, so Let's get it, man. So, of course, I have to introduce my co-host, as always, my right-hand man, Mr. Southern himself, Coach 67 Sports TV. How you doing, brother?
I'm blessed and highly favored, bro. How you doing this evening?
Man, I cannot complain about anything, man. Um, so we got a lot to talk about, man. It's the um off season of college football, especially in the HBCU world. A lot of scrimmages going on. Speaking of scrimmages, you went to the southern scrimmages, the southern scrimmage, and you you were pleased. Talk about it.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you know, I appreciate you. We brothers. You the co-host of HBCU Fanatics. I'm co-host on the Southern Baller Show. We got this partnership locked in, and we appreciate everybody that's dropping through, showing some love. We appreciate everybody tuning into this special HBCU Fanatics edition of the Southern Baller Show. We appreciate everybody that's watching it live or that's going to watch it later on playback. And yes, I was in attendance to Southern University's inaugural 2025 Blue versus Gold spring game. It was a very festive atmosphere. Uh, Usually, the start of the game is at 1 o'clock. Last year, it started at maybe about 107, 108, 109, 110, something like that. The year before that, it started like, around the same time. This year, I arrived probably about 15 minutes late. And, as usual at Southern University, it is a family friendly atmosphere. We talk about this on your channel in terms of our other show, The Black Man's Perspective. And, you do a good job talking about the dynamics between black men and black women and how we need to be on one accord. We need to be as one. We need to be together. But truthfully speaking, it's a family friendly atmosphere in terms of you got a lot of black nuclear families, a lot of black love. It's a lot of unity and togetherness and that type of thing. Excellent environment. So I get there, my mom and I we get there, and you know, uh, going towards the north end zone, like behind the end zone, behind the goal post, the offensive linemen working and they doing drills, and on that same side of the field, going towards the nursing building, like on that half of the field, they're doing 7-on-7. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, hey, I come here to see a scrimmage. I didn't come here to see 7-on-7. Like, you and I, we talk about this behind the scenes all the time. I was
Mhm.
supposed to have my own 7-on-7 team, but I'm going to keep it a buck. I'd rather 11-on-11 any day over 7-on-7. So I'm kind of like scratching my head, like, what the heck is going on? Like, why we watching the glorified 7-on-7? Like, what the hell is going on here? So, one of the ladies explained the officials hadn't arrived yet. And I'm like, bro, like, what kind of stuff? I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I know as a junior high / middle school coach, especially like teams I've been a head coach of, they've had instances where I had a basketball game and official arrived late because they have like day jobs and they leaving their job and they come in officiate the game. Or, football game, they leaving their job, they get stuck in traffic. So we got to delay kickoff for the football game, like maybe 30 minutes, whatever, whatever. But man, this is a college and it's a Saturday. Like, why be having officiating issues? But like I said, I don't know if it's officials, SWAC officials they brought in, but whatever. It kind of make it kind of make us look like, man, come on, man, we operating on color people time like this some real
Only
nigga thing.
us, huh?
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Only us.
So so of course, it ended up getting delayed a good while, like maybe I venture to say maybe 45 minutes to an hour, maybe. But it got delayed a good little while, so we watched a good bit of 7-on-7 and just watching them from a 7-on-7 perspective. I'm not gonna lie, they look crisp, so on and so forth. They're moving the ball, whoop the whoop the whoop. And I'm like, all right, cool. But one of the issues I had is, year before last, everybody said on the east side. For those individuals that don't know, at Southern University, A.W. Mumford Stadium, P. Richardson Field, the east side is the away side. And,
Hmm.
they don't really sell. The last couple years, they really had been selling concessions. They had a snowball truck. Well, last year, let me fast forward to last year. Last year, everyone stayed on the west side, which is the home side. And it really doesn't matter because, when you're sitting on the west side, the sun is at your back during the season. But if you're sitting on the east side, the sun is beaming right in your face. But it's the heat of the day. It's springtime. So either way, you're still going to be in the sun. So last year they had a snowball truck, but this year we were back on the east side. They only had like maybe 6, 7 people on the west side. Maybe that's people's special privileges or whatever the case may be. But everybody sat on the east side. People had the umbrellas. Of course, they're not checking bags for the spring game because it's a scrimmage. And for the most part, everybody that's there, they pretty much season ticket holders. They go all the Southern University football games anyway. So you're not really worried about any nonsense. So this year, from a concession standpoint, because you really don't sell concessions, but they had a couple food trucks around the area, but they had one snowball truck right outside of A.W. Mumford Stadium on the east side. Now I don't know, where they call it different areas where we from. Some people call it snow cones, we call them snowballs. I don't know what they call them in different areas, but we call them snowballs. So the snowball truck right outside, and not only that, but they were selling turkey necks also. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I really don't eat turkey necks, but I see some people with snowballs, some people with turkey necks, but a lot of people have snowballs and turkey necks. I'm like, man, that sounds like a bad combination in terms of it may taste good, but you're gonna blow the bathroom up. So
For real. Yeah.
and then not only that, but usually for all the Southern University home games, they sell like hot dogs and hamburgers and nachos. They didn't sell all that because it's a spring game, but they do sell some real good lemonade. But these lemonades are like either $7 for like a 20 ounce and like $10 for like a 32 ounce. I'm like, damn. So usually we get them during the season, but in the spring game we brought our own drinks. Brought some water, like 4 or 5 bottles of water. So we were good. They really hadn't started yet, so I had some of my people coming through. Y'all gonna get to see it if y'all follow my channel. Y'all get to see what the special thing I had planned. That's why I had to bring my people through. But I went outside, and when I was coming back in, I bumped into Kendrick Grimes. He recognized me. That one thing I could say. I appreciate all the love at A.W. Mumford Stadium. And I had like 10 people that recognized me. So all of these people that was at the
That's
spring
good.
game, they're the die-hard Southern University fans. And the thing I'm kind of synonymous for at this point is my pre-game and post-game reactions. Pre-game analysis and post-game reaction. So, Kendrick Grimes bumped into me. We exchanged phone numbers. And, I don't like he cool people, real nice guy. Major shout out to Kendrick Grimes.
Shout out to
And
Kendrick Grimes.
yeah, and not only that, but I bumped into Coach Kevin Walker. For those individuals like, man, Coach, who's Coach Kevin Walker? He one of the like the loyal subscribers to my channel. For those individuals that watch like all of my content, when Southern University won the SWAC West against UAPB, he the guy that kind of got in and gave me a hug doing like my quick post game reaction, not the full like live stream, but the quick one. So that's Coach Kevin Walker right there. I bumped into him too. Maybe shout out to him. Then we came in and now they actually got it going. Bring my people in the stadium. They had already snapped. They had already got it going before we got back. But Southern's offense, they kind of went 4-and-out right away. So Jalen Woods, he's with the first unit. Then they bring in Jamar Jones. Jamar Jones came in. He led the offense straight down the field, and they scored a touchdown. And I'm like, wow. So then after that, they put
Mm.
Jalen Woods in. Jalen Woods bring him down the field and they score a touchdown. Then Jalen Woods bring him to the other end of the field, score a touchdown. And I'm like, damn, like the offense is really getting on. So, let me kind of add a little context. You know, that first series where they went 4-0, Kelby Givens played that particular series, and that kind of was it. I think he kind of shut it down for the rest of the day. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, from what I'm understanding, I don't know for certain. I know Kelby Givens played in that first series. That kind of was it. And then I think maybe I don't know if Herman Bristol the third and Vince Page played, but from what I saw, like the couple real impact players defensively, they played in the initial series that they went 4-0, and that was it. But the next series, Jamari Jones led them down the field. They scored a touchdown. Then after that, you know, Jalen Woods led them down the field. They scored a touchdown. And Jalen Woods kind of brought them up and down the field. And I'm not going to lie, the offense, it looks so much more efficient and fluid. It's a lot crispier, smoother, a lot more efficient this spring than it was the last two springs because year before last, they struggled with Harold Blood at the helm. And I gave him grace. I'm like, all right. He played good against Virginia Lynchburg. And, Virginia Lynchburg was for homecoming that year.
Right.
Then he got a SWAC championship game, and Jackson State just kind of dog walked him. But he showed some progression from the SWAC championship game to the spring game. Now, it wasn't good enough. I'd already said it. Then I'm like, he showed some decent progression from that SWAC championship game to the spring. So I gave him some grace, but I'm like, if he played this way during the season, that's going to be a problem. And of course, he played that way during the season, so it was a problem. Same thing last year with Noah. Noah was the best of the three. I felt like Noah was the best. Jalen Woods was second best, and Zay was the third. And I say the same thing, but no, I'm like, I think he showed some progression, but it's good for a spring game. But if he plays this way during the regular season, it's going to be a problem. And guess what? He played the same way during the regular season. Whereas on the flip side today, I know Kelby Givens only kind of played like that first drive or whatever, but the offense was smooth and efficient. If either Jalen Woods or Jamari Jones, whichever one is in, to me, I feel like Jones earned his stripes. He done paid his. I'm sorry, Jalen Woods. Excuse me. Jalen Woods done paid his dues. He done earned his stripes. I feel like it was Jalen Woods' job to lose, just the way last year it was Noah's job to lose, and the year before that was Harold Blood's job to lose. So I feel like Jalen Woods earned those stripes, but I feel whether it's Jalen Woods or Jamari Jones, either one, I feel like either one of them are equipped to be the quarterback, and I think the offense is in good hands. The offense dominated today. Now, the thing that I kind of want to point out too, like you might see a couple clips because I'm not doing like I did years past and post them all at once. I'm gonna kind of drop a few clips a day, but the clips got a lot of views. Like one short got like 600 some views, the other short got 500 some, the other one got 500 or some. So the views kind of going up from a short standpoint. I'm gonna kind of drop a few per day, but from a efficiency standpoint, the offense looked good. I think whether it's Jalen Woods or Jamari Jones, I think if the offense plays today, if they play during the season the way they played today, the offense is going to be in good hands. And if the defense played next season the way they did this past season, and you put that offense and defense together, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. But again, you didn't have Kelby. You only had Kelby Givens for the first series. But I'm not going to lie, they look stout up front on both sides of the ball, whereas last year the defensive line dominated the offensive line. The offensive line looked pretty good, but they didn't do a great job running the ball. And the problem with that was the best running back you had in the stadium was sitting in the stands watching as opposed to being on the field, and you got three freshman running backs. I'm not at liberty to tell Coach Graves and his staff what to do, but I think the prudent thing would be to try to get Kendrick Ryan back and have him understand, hey, you're going to be my feature back, and we're going to ride you. We're going to saddle you up, and we're going to ride you this whole season. Because really, outside of Jalen Woods and Jamar Jones, the best offensive player in the A.W. Mumford Stadium, and they weren't even on the field. So And I'm not gonna lie, I got to give credit to Darren Morris too. He had a long reception. He cleared his number one receiver in my opinion at this point. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people talk about, well, what does it say about the defense? Well, all the top dogs for the defense didn't play. They got a lot of holes to fill. But the last few years, the defense has carried this team. So I'm not concerned about the defense. I was concerned about the offense, and the offense is kind of eased and alleviated my concerns with the way they performed today, the way they played. They played exceptionally well. So maybe just shout out to Coach Graves and staff. I feel like the only issue you really need to resolve, you got to bring Kendrick Grimes back. I don't care what nobody say. And like I said, I bumped into him. I talked to him for a few minutes, and then once the offense just kind of moved the ball up and down the field, up and down the field, up and down the field, up and down the field. At that point it was kind of halftime. I had seen enough, so I dipped. And as I was walking out, Kendrick Ryan's mom recognized me. His dad and his mom was together. They were both nice people, but his dad didn't say too much. His mom did all the talking. And I'm not gonna say what she told me, but you and I know each other. You can kind of read my mind.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna say it, but you know what I'm thinking. And at the end of the day, I think Coach Graves and staff, I think if they won't be, I mean, they were excellent today, but the litmus test that you're really trying to overcome is Jackson State. The way the offense moved the ball today, good, but Kendrick Grimes take that offense to the next level. Y'all need to fix this, in my opinion. They need to go get that young man back. I mean,
They,
I haven't been in this situation, but in real life, if I had a woman that I knew was my wife and I did something wrong and I mistreated her, whatever, and she left me, and I knew she the one, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go fight tooth and nail to get that woman back. I'm not trying to disrespect Kendrick Grimes. I'm just saying this how important and vital he can be to your offense. If Jalen Woods and Jamari Jones played this well today, imagine if you'd had Kendrick Grimes running the ball on top of that. Man, that would take your offense to a whole nother level. I mean, I don't think the coaching staff is gonna go back to try to get him. He's already in the portal. But to
mhm.
me, I think it'll be in their best interest to kind of go do what they got to do to get that young man back on the field.
Absolutely, because in my opinion, Kendrick Grimes was definitely the premier back of that offense last year.
Without
Um,
question.
so yeah, I definitely think if y'all let that young man walk, y'all definitely um will have to forego of trying to replace a talent like Kendrick Grimes. And but however it go, I wish that young man the
Oh, well,
best. He definitely will fall. Things will fall in places for him. But I hope he stays with y'all.
and I'm not gonna lie, bro. I'm a diehard Southern University fan, and if he ended up going somewhere else, I'm not gonna lie. Even if he ended up going within a SWAC, I would understand because, you know, I'm not gonna go into no details. But at the end of the day, like, I just feel like, if this man has one more year eligibility left, with him being the guy that he was, like, why wouldn't you resolve the issue and try to make things right? In my opinion, and like I said, I'm not gonna say what he said. He's supposed to. He and I we texted back and forth.
Hmm.
At some point we're gonna try to put something together, and
Oh, that's
I
gonna
don't
be
want to
dope.
say, I don't want to say anything. I want him like whatever story he wants to tell. I want him to tell whatever story he wants to tell,
Right, right.
and let him say what he wants to say. I'm not. I don't want to say this, coach. I don't want to say that. But at the end of the day, like from an offensive standpoint, this past season, he was the best player. And I beat this from the whole season, bro. Like even the first game, they claim he did whatever he did. He didn't start, and I'm like, what the f is Kendrick Grimes? Kobe Dillon, like they force fed Kobe Dillon. Kendrick Grimes came in the game. They really didn't give him the ball like they should have, and it kind of progressed that way to me most of the season. So at the end of the day, as good as the offense was, I think Kendrick Grimes would take it to the next level. And people say this in the chat, I mean, I didn't recognize him, because he had a hat on or whatever. But he came, he recognized me. But he was clearly sitting in the stands at AW Memphis Stadium. People knew that was him, and it was like, man, one of my diehard subscribers said, he was like, man, coach, like that was the worst thing about the scrimmage. Everything else was great. It was a great atmosphere, a great vibe. But they was like, he said this is the thing that hurt his heart, the fact that Kenny Ryan is sitting in the stands as opposed to being on the field. So hopefully they can resolve that. Hopefully he can come back. And I mean, me, I'm kind of fair and I'm balanced with my approach. Anybody, I done had a handful of people tell me this. They was like, Coach, that's why I rock with you on your channel. I'm talking about like diehard Southern University fans. Because they were like, man, you're going to keep it real. Like, if something else up, you're going to keep it a buck. You
Right.
know. So my thing with this situation here is like, I mean, how am I say this, bro? Let me phrase it this way. If you got a situation where, like, we're going to say Jordan Lewis, for example. Jordan Lewis left, from what I understand, behind the scenes, uh, like Coach Dooley and staff, somebody talked to him, and cooler heads prevailed, and he came back. From what I understand, maybe the same thing happened with Kelby Gibbons. But Kendrick Grimes has one more eligibility left, and from what I'm understanding, he's already graduated. So whether he lands somewhere else or not, I hope he does if he decides to leave. But I wish him well, and I'm not gonna lie, like the Trey Lance situation,
Hmm.
because people that follow my channel, it was a little bit of a back and forth between he and I. It wasn't really like nothing necessary, but these modern day athletes are hypersensitive. But I just was saying, I'm like, dude, you were slated to be like the next Jordan Lewis, and you went to Indiana University. Like, to me, in terms of your on the field career, it was in your best interest to stay at Southern. And his approach was like, hey, you don't know me, you don't know nothing about me. Like, who are you to tell me what's in my best interest and my family's best interest? And I'm like, dude, all I did was give you praise, and I wish you well when you left. So it wasn't contentious. So, like, you didn't talk about how I praised you. You didn't talk about how I said you had a great spring game. And you didn't talk about how I wished you well when you went to Indiana. And then he was like, well, hey, when I went to Indiana, I got hurt. You need to do your homework. And my whole approach is like, look, I follow Southern. I cover Southern. I don't care about Indiana. Like, that was your choice. You love. So I ain't worried about what happened with you in Indiana. But reading your stats off, guess what? Once you leave Southern, that stat sheet go blank. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I ain't trying to throw shade at him, but I'm like, staying in Southern was in your best interest. Whereas if Kendrick Rhymes, if he left, it's like, I would understand if he left, and he's in the port as we speak. I think Coach Gray and his staff, in the way, from what I read in the paper, like, he pretty much content with, like, hey, if he got these three freshmen, like, running back is a position a freshman could play. So to me, he's kind of seeing like he's already turned the page. I think that's the wrong mindset to have, me personally.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. A lot of these young folks, you realize it ain't nothing personal, especially if you're not malicious or vicious or what you're saying. If it's not nothing like you're not coming at him in a way where you're talking down to him. No, you just saying that basically in a nutshell to wrap it up that you just wanted him to stay at Southern because he was an awesome player. That's all.
No. Honestly, I didn't want him to stay at Southern. That's my whole thing. Whether it's Trey Lang, whether it's Kendrick Grimes, whether it's Jordan Lewis, Kelby Gibbons, whoever, I want these young men to do what's in their best interest. I'm a Southern University fan, but I'm not selfish to the point where, like, this is your life. You have to do what's in your own best interest. I'm not gonna
So
lie.
you just basically want the best for him,
Yeah,
man. If he
and,
don't
and,
suck
and
that up, man, he'll be
well, I mean,
a awesome athlete. He got hurt in Indiana, you know.
bro, look, that don't matter because you know why? Because after he left Indiana, he went to Eastern Michigan, and he didn't do nothing in Eastern Michigan either. And, I mean, it wasn't that no real major back and forth. The thing was, it wasn't really about him. What it really started out is, I was getting ready to I was starting a series in terms of with this NIL. You and I and JB, just a group chat. We talk about this today. I say like in the '90s, like it was messed up where you would have players come to an institution and the coaches, finesse the parents and like, hey, get the player to that school, and then the coach up and leave, and this player stuck at this institution. That wasn't right. But now it's gone so far to the opposite end of the spectrum. Like players could be starters, they could be star players, and they could just jump in the portal because for no real rhyme or reason. They might not be unhappy. They could be happy. They might not be happy. In a lot of instances, they could be happy, but they won't see if the grass is green on the other side. They won't see if there's NIL money out there, and they just leave for no reason. They hop in the portal. You know what I'm saying? And in his particular instance, I'm not saying that's what he did. The thing I was saying is he was slated to be a featured guy, but what they ended up doing was once he left, they took Taj Brown from nose guard and they moved him to defensive end, and it was no drop off. Whereas he went to Indiana, he didn't even play, but he claimed he got hurt. Then he transferred from Indiana to Eastern Michigan, and he didn't play that either. So I'm not saying it wasn't his best interest to go to Indiana. If they gave him some kind of NIL money, just say they gave him $1 million. I don't know if they did or not. That's his personal business. I care less. But I'm saying,
Right.
in terms of him actually playing on the field, him staying at Southern was in his best interest. Now, as with Kendrick Grimes has stayed at Southern for 4 years, and truthfully speaking, no disrespect to C.J. Russell and Kobe Dillon, but Kendrick Grimes was the game breaker. He was explosive, dynamic player of those three in the offense. And to me, I felt like they tried to evenly divide carries between Kobe Dillon and Kendrick Grimes. Whereas to me, if you ran the ball, we're just gonna say 35 times.
Right.
20 to 25 of them carries should have been for Kendrick Grimes. And you split those other carries between C.J. Russell and Kobe Dillon, however you want to do it. Now, I'm not disrespecting them. I'm just saying, years past, you might have 2, 3 dynamic receivers at Southern. You didn't have that this year. Chandler Whitfield was by far your best receiver, and he was hurt a good portion of the year. So you didn't really have no game breakers from a receiver standpoint. So you needed Kendrick Grimes to get those extra touches, and he didn't. So, I'm not saying this is the reason why he leaving. Maybe something more to it behind the scenes. Whenever he and I do this interview, we'll be able to, he'll be able to tell whatever story he wants to tell. But at the end of the day, like if he left, he's already graduated, from what I understand. I can understand him leaving, and he has 1 year eligibility left. But to me, in Trey Lane's situation, Trey Lane, I think that was an ill-advised move. Whereas in Kendrick Grimes' instance, even if he went to Jackson State tomorrow, I would understand, because at the end of the day, like I feel like it's more on the coaching staff as opposed to Kendrick Grimes. Whereas with Trey Lane, he kind of do his own situation. And for him to find my channel as of today has 712 subscribers, bro. For him to find my video, he had to Google search, YouTube search his name to find my video, and to hop in my comment section and like, hey, you don't know nothing about me. Who are you to tell me what was best for me and my family? And I was like, wow, bro, like really?
Yeah. You,
So,
you never
so
know who
yeah,
listening, man. But he needs to understand. A person like you definitely wants the best for him, man. But you just commentate on Southern ball. That's it. Nothing
yeah,
personal.
and I mean, like I said, it wasn't never nothing personal. It just was more like, bro, like if you worried about playing, if that's your ultimate goal, just to play, Southern was your best bet. Because if you look at all of his stats from Eastern Michigan Community College, East Mississippi Community College, and Southern, or those 5 years of his career, those are the only 2 years he really like did damage. And his best year was at them two institutions. And those bigger name schools, he didn't do nothing, bro. So it's in his best interest to stay at Southern, but it's kind of passing on. It is what it is. It wasn't no beef. It just was like him trying to, him being sensitive about the situation. And, I still wish him well. I mean, it wasn't nothing personal. And
Yeah.
all that, but just the way I did with Kendrick Grimes, I reached out to him in the comment section. Once I reached out, the back and forth stopped.
Right. And we're gonna go into the MEAC, but I just have a few questions regarding the SWAC, man. Kendrick Wade is no longer the coach of Mississippi Valley. He's now, congratulations to him. He accepted a job. He's currently a coach at Memphis, the Memphis Tigers, as a tight end coach. So congratulations to that brother. But whoever who took the reins over as head coach for Mississippi Valley for the Delta Devils is former first round pick cornerback Terrell Buckley.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Terrell Buckley of the New England Patriots.
yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Uh, what's your opinion on that? Do you think? Because me personally, I like Kendrick Wade. Um, he didn't have to go over to Mississippi Valley. He could have stayed at Delta. Uh, Delta was a Delta State
Uh-huh.
Division II school, but
Yeah.
they were doing pretty good during that time. So he could have just stayed at Delta, but he chose to go to Mississippi Valley. Um, Only 2 years and they got rid of him. And I thought that was a little bit too premature in my opinion. I think they could have gave him 1 or 2 more years, but the athletic administration decided it was time for a change. Now they got Terrell Buckley. Um, and from my understanding, Terrell Buckley's he's been coaching since Florida State 2007, and then he coached at Akron as a cornerback coach, Louisville, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. He played. He also was a head coach during the time of the XFL before it merged to the UFL. Um, for the Orlando Guardians, but as of 2025, he accepted the position of Mississippi Valley State. So, do you think this should be a turnaround for Valley?
Honestly, bro,
Honestly, yeah.
I think it's too difficult to say. However, if I had to lean one way or the other, I would say no. I
Mm,
think them getting rid of Kendrick Wade is it was a move that was, like you said, I think it was premature. I think, especially if you're gonna pull a coach from another institution, you have to give that coach at least 3 or 4 years to turn that program around.
exactly.
And they only gave him two. And I mean, that's an extremely difficult situation to be in at Valley. And honestly, looking at Mickey Joseph at Grambling, seeing what Dion did at Jackson State.
Mm,
Realistically, Jackson State, you can't compare Jackson State and Valley. They both in the SWAC. They both have legendary players that came through there, like, Walter Payton and Jerry Rice. But at this point, comparing Valley and Jackson State, even though they're both in the same conference and they're in the same state, it's like comparing apples and oranges. So, it's I don't know. I have a soft spot in my heart for Valley. You and I talked about it. It's not just the
yes.
fact that they they done helped Southern get in a SWAC championship game on a couple of occasions recently. It's not just
Right.
that. It's like that, bro. This has been a bottom feeder for so long, and I'm not gonna lie. At this point, I think they're either at or they surpassed where Prairie View was in terms of being at the bottom for so long. And for them to think that, oh, he has an NFL pedigree, he's going to be the wave of magic wand and turn things around. Like, bro, that's a difficult. It's good as I'm gonna give you an example. Somebody like Fred McNair.
Right.
As good as Fred McNair has been on a SWAC level, I kind of felt like in terms of Alcorn State, I think Alcorn State fan base, I think maybe they were kind of spoiled in terms of the success they had at one point. But he brought him. He lost two SWAC championship games, but he also won two of them too. And he lost both of those games Celebration Bowl against North Carolina A&T. But I felt like, had they hired Fred McNair, I honestly think, he would have been able to turn Texas Southern program around because he has He has a pedigree in the SWAC, and he's shown that he's a good coach. He was a good player in the SWAC, the whole nine. Whereas Valley, I, and Jay Good, and Big Joe, and JB, and Brent Fox, we talked about this in our group chat, our Southern Baller Show collective group chat. And bro, I'm gonna be honest with you. Jay Good pointed this out. Shout out to Jay Good. Even
Shout
Fred
out Big J.
McNair, even Fred McNair, a satellite, because Willie Totten already was the head coach there. Even they offered Fred McNair that opportunity. I don't think he would jump at that opportunity, to
No,
be truthful. So, I mean, if Terrell Buckley turns it around, I think he's an excellent coach. But even I think just a good coach might struggle in that situation. That's a difficult
now
situation to be in.
I'm gonna ask this: you think Mississippi Valley, as well as, and even though we reaching over to the MEAC, a little bit, but we will talk about them and coming up next regarding the topic of the show. But
Uh-huh.
you think Mississippi Valley got into, basically, um, a former NFL coach? You know what I mean? Like Dion, or of course, nothing compared to Dion, how flashy he was and his big character, but um, Terrell Buckley. Then you got Michael Vick. Then you got Deshaun Jackson at Delaware State, and of course Vick is over there at Norfolk. So you think Mississippi Valley's like, hell with it? Let's try somebody we can get like a Terrell Buckley, and hoping that it will change their luck. But they, even with this, they still have to be patient.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
still have to
one,
be patient.
but what you was gonna ask, bro? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, just that was the question. You think that's what their thinking is, as far as a former NFL coach, or excuse me, a former NFL player,
Yeah,
who played at a very high level? Because Terrell Buckley was a dog, in
yeah,
his
yeah.
day.
I
Um,
mean, that might be the rationale, but like you said, even though I don't like the way he ended everything with Jackson State, like you said, bro, like all NFL players aren't the same. If shout out to Desmond Allen, one of the diehard subscribers to my channel. I appreciate him to the fullest. Always
Shout out
showing me.
Desmond.
Of course, I don't mean to divert real quick. Let me tell a real quick story about Desmond Allen. He's from Jackson, right? And
Right.
National Signing Day, like they have him in like gyms or whatever. But he said when he did his signing, he played baseball at Southern, so he
Hmm.
signed at the church. So in Jackson, where he from, at the church he was at, church he attended, whatever. When he announced that he signed with Southern, they start booing him in church.
Hey, I remember
So,
that. I remember that. He told that story in the
yeah,
chat.
so
Yeah.
maybe shout out to Desmond Allen. But back to
And he's asking a question. Hold on, before you say that point. He said, if you pay Fred, but can you pay Fred's assistant? Meaning, if you pay Fred at Valley, but what can you pay Fred's assistant at Valley?
yeah, and this another thing too. I was gonna point this out, right? But well, I'm gonna touch a few things. First, all former NFL players aren't treated the same.
Yeah.
Now, people don't realize this. Not, you know, Pete Richardson, the dean of SWAT. People don't realize Pete Richardson played in the NFL.
Yeah.
People didn't realize that. So Pete Richardson did play in the NFL for 2 years. I think he played cornerback for the Buffalo Bills, and the couple of clips and highlights they show. Like he was a nasty firecracker too. They showed him doing
Hmm.
some dirty stuff. I'm like, damn man, Coach Pete was getting out in his damn. But anyway, I mean, if you compare Dion to Chris Dishman to Terrell Buckley, Dion is on another level. I don't like, even though I don't like him, the way he handled the Jackson State situation, the way he handled the whole Ryan Garcia situation. You got to realize he's a charismatic guy. Like he is kind of like a once in a lifetime type of coach. The only guy I think would really be comparable to him would be Ray Lewis. You and I talked about this. I think Ray Lewis would be comparable to him. And I know you kind of vouch for him because his other guy because he played for the Ravens. Even Ed Reed, I don't think Ed Reed would compare to Dion. Uh, at one point, Southern kicked around the Marshall Falk idea, from what I understand. Nobody has been able to confirm or deny this rumor. I don't think Marshall Falk would have got it done. I think Eddie George did a decent job at Tennessee State before going to Bowling Green. In terms of Deshaun Jackson and Mike Vick, I think they're closer to, not in terms of personality, in terms of charisma, I think, but in terms of effectiveness, I think Mike Vick and Deshaun Jackson are closer to the Eddie George, Deion Sanders end of things, whereas I think Chris Dishman and Terrell Buckley, I think they're gonna struggle a little bit. And from a financial standpoint, let me attack uh, Valley and Desmond Allen. He brought up an excellent point.
Appreciate it, Desmond.
He's from Jackson. I'm not gonna lie, bro. I kid you not. I'm a middle school head football coach, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my assistant coach and the two deans at my school. This was before. I can't remember who the head coach before Kendrick Wade was, but they ended up getting rid of one of their coaches and they ended up hiring somebody. And the two of the deans and my assistant coach, they're like, man, coach, why don't you go apply for the Alcorn State? Mississippi Valley head coaching job. I'm like, dude, y'all do realize I'm a middle school coach. They're like, hell, coach, your credentials probably good enough to go coach, your credentials still good enough to be the head coach at Mississippi Valley. I'm like, man, you serious? And then the other PE teacher, he's from Mississippi also. He played football at Louisiana Tech. He said, coach, you might think this a game. He said, they might have told you this jokingly. But he was like, Valley's in a tough situation. And I'm like, well, break it down for me, coach. The school he went to, and he ended up coaching at the school at one point.
Mm-hmm.
He said, coach, that's their head coach there at their school. It's a 6A school in Mississippi because, he was saying that, at one point, one of the schools, aside from Southern Lab, the school that's closest to Southern University is Scotlandville High. That's where Xavier Z.T. Set came from. At one point, they were a perennial power in football and basketball, but they started to decline lately. Salute to Big Joe.
Big Joe.
And they started to decline, but they went to Mississippi and played this school. And he was like, coach, like, they
Damn. Look what Desmond Allen put to your point.
Yeah, hey, Desmond Allen, he beat me to it. That was one of the things I was going to say. He said, coach, the head coach at this school, I'm telling you about, he said he makes double. You hear me? Double what Mississippi Valley head coach makes. This is a 6A high school football coach. He said they got a lot of high school coaches that's making double whatever Valley head coach making. So he was like, coach, at the end of the day, like, high school, if you gave a guy that's a perennial state champion winner on a 6A level in Mississippi, he was like, if you offered that guy that Valley head coaching job, he said that guy would turn it down. Because he said, first of all, he'll be making less money. And then second of all, he'll be in a much more advantageous and difficult situation to be in from a coaching standpoint.
See, that's why I don't understand, coach. Like, Kendrick Wade was willing to make his win-loss record as a coach ugly.
And not only that, but he
you know what I mean?
He went to
Valley.
He went to Valley.
Yeah.
So he was vested in terms of he wanted Valley to be successful. He wanted Valley to grow. And like I said, coach was like, man, coach, I'm telling you, coach. He said, not too many people is interested in that job. So that's why when Desmond Allen pointed out, even if they were able to afford Fred McNair, would they be able to afford his assistance? But truthfully speaking, I don't even think Fred McNair would even take that job, And, Big Joe brought this up on another episode of Southern Baller Show. He was basically saying that, we was talking about Jerry Rice, like, hey, why don't he take the head coaching job? And Big Joe was like, he said, man, coach, he said, Jerry Rice is a celebrity. He lives in Cali. Like, he not trying to go back to either be the Mississippi.
Right.
He go down head coach at Valley. And like I say, anytime you got 6A, 5A, 4A head football coaches in in the state of Mississippi that would be interested in taking that job because one, it's a difficult sell, and you got to realize Deion was able to do all that at Jackson State. I don't know if he'd have been able to. I'm not saying he wouldn't have had success, but it would have been a much steeper and tougher hill to climb had he went to Mississippi Valley as opposed to Jackson State. I'm gonna just keep it a buck. And as much as he complained about the conditions at Jackson State, I guarantee they far worse at Valley.
Oh
So
yeah,
at the end of the
no
day,
doubt.
I mean, it's gonna be a tall mountain for Terrell Buckley to climb.
Dang.
If he's able to be successful, he not only good, no, he a great head coach. But I hate to say it, if I was a betting man, I bet that he probably not gonna have too much success there. Even Chris Dishman, I think Chris Dishman is in a better situation than Terrell Buckley. But him, I think the two of them and Mickey Joseph, I think eventually they're gonna come to the realization that when you have these, PWIs that have more resources at their disposal, even Ed Reed found it out. Like, dude, being at the University of Miami and being at Bethune-Cookman, you compare the apples to oranges, bro. So I think they're gonna come to the realization that this is a difficult situation to be in when you're at these HBCUs, especially when they're severely underfunded and they don't have a whole lot of resources at their disposal. Not even like Desmond Allen, not even media coverage.
Man, and then to my point, what Desmond Allen just put, Delta State gets more love than Valley. Yeah, Kendrick Wade could have just stayed at Delta State and be good. But he wanted to take on that challenge at Mississippi Valley. So I don't know why the Mississippi Valley's administration did not give him more time. I don't understand it. Unless we missing some information, coach, and he wanted to leave.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, like you say, I think unless there's something behind the scenes, because you and I talk about this all the time, because I'm gonna switch sports for a second, right?
Right.
We talked about the Luca situation on this channel. Bro, can't nobody tell me that Nico Harrison, it wasn't something personal for him to trade Luca. Luca. I told you this at the time. I'm like, dude, this is a stupid ass trade. Like,
Right.
Luca is 25 and he'd have been like first team all NBA 5 times. Whereas you got Anthony Davis, who is an injury waiting to happen. So there's something behind the scenes to that's more than meets the eye. And even going back to the SWAC, I remember when Doug Williams was the head coach at Grambling, and he was having a lot of success. And then this was his first stint as the head coach at Grambling. And they ended up getting rid of him. And we were like, man, something going on more behind the scenes. And they come to find out, like, Mr. Williams was fraternizing with some students from what we understand. Allegedly. And then he had a second stint, and then it's more behind the scenes type stuff. And even going on, HBCU Overdrive, shout out to Doc Holliday. I went on his channel and he was like, bro, that's part of the reason. Part of the issues Mickey Joseph is having at Grambling is the fact that, Mickey Joseph has been a heck of a recruiter at these PWIs like LSU and Florida State. He'd have been around the block. He'd have been Nickel State. He'd have been all around the SWAC. He'd have been to a bunch of PWIs. He's from New Orleans. He went to Nebraska. But it's a lot of politics. A lot of politics in in these colleges and these institutions, you know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, I think something behind the scenes might happen with Kendrick Wade. Even if it ain't behind the scenes, from what I understood, like, administration is just short-sighted. For you to get rid of Kendrick Wade, unless it was something major that we don't know about, to me that was short-sighted, you know what I'm saying? Oh yeah, and we are aware that he played DB in Mississippi, Desmond Allen. I mean, that's how he ended up, made it to the NFL. He ended up playing for the Patriots. But, I think, I wish Terrell Buckley well, but like you saying and like Desmond Allen is pointing out, it's going to be a tall hill for Terrell Buckley to climb. Even with him being a Mississippi high school football legend, like, the resources at Valley is, even like Jay Good was pointing out, Like, even if you compare Prairie View when it was at their low point, Prairie View is still backed by Texas A&M, whereas Valley don't have that type of backing. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, bro, like it's gonna be a tough hill for Terrell Buckley to climb.
Yeah, it definitely is, man. And I know a lot of all the teams in the SWAC is trying to get their situation. James Cosley the third, the coach of the FAMU, he's trying to get his FAMU Rattlers back. In contention as far as trying to be on top of the SWAC, their side of the SWAC again, and um, Cedric Thomas over there at Alcorn. Um,
He was
it's gonna
Fred
be
McNair's
interesting.
coach.
Say again?
Yeah, he was one of Fred McNair's assistant coach on his staff.
Yeah, yeah, he was. Um, but yeah, man. Before we move on from the SWAC, is there anything else you want to add or we forget about?
No, bro, I'm not gonna lie. Like Desmond Allen said, this was great conversation in terms of the Terrell Buckley, not just Terrell Buckley, but Chris Dishman, Mike Dick, Deshaun Jackson, like NFL players. Of course, we already had this discussion. Of course, like Jay Good and Joe Town, they both played D line. Jay Good is Southern. What school? Big Joe, put it in the
Louisville,
chat before we still, huh?
Louisville.
Louisville. So you know, uh, Joe Town went to a PWI, and Jay Good played at Southern, and it's kind of interesting to see how they have like different points of view in terms of you know like high profile coaches, that type of thing. And Joe Town's perspective was, like if you look at the guys like Dion, like Mike Dick, like Deshaun Jackson, like they didn't ask these institutions to come there. Those institutions reached out to them for them to become the head coaches.
Right.
And but whereas Jay Good and I, we was talking about, especially when they had the Ed Reed situation. Like when you come to these HBCUs, like you don't realize you don't have the same type of like funding at your disposal, and it's a difficult situation to be in. And Ed Reed, he kind of found that out the hard way. And then not only that, you know, at these PWIs, especially like LSU, that's one thing I used to hate in Baton Rouge with WFB and WBRZ. And, I talk about this on my channel often. And Desmond Allen kind of always pointed out, he was saying that, the coverage with WFB and WBRZ is biased against Southern, whereas it's favorable towards LSU. If LSU has some type of scandal with them misappropriating funds, LSU has a lot more funds to misappropriate. Whereas, when you see WAFB and WBLZ, they might mention that's Channel 2 and Channel 9 in Baton Rouge. They kind of sweep those issues under the rug, and if they talk about it, they only kind of mention it in passing. Whereas, if there's some type of scandal at Southern, it's like they want to highlight it, they want to emphasize it, and they want to beat it in the ground like a dead horse. And they want to beat a dead horse with it. So it's like a ridiculous double standard when it comes to coverage of PWIs and HBCUs in that regard. And I think when it comes to the whole coaching thing, uh, like HBCUs don't have the same type of funding as PWIs, especially when it comes to Power Five PWIs.
Right. Yeah, yeah, man. It's the funding is definitely a difference. I mean, but it is what it is, man. But moving on, moving on. All right. So the reason why I want to talk about celebrity coaches at MEAC and how they do. So Michael Vick, is those who don't know, and we mentioned it. We're talking about when we were talking about the SWAC. Michael Vick is now the head coach of the Norfolk Spartans, and former wide receiver that played with him with the Eagles, Deshaun Jackson, is the head coach of the Delaware State Hornets in the MEAC. So, for example, I subscribe to a YouTube channel, You know how well off media, how Deion Sanders Jr. got well off media. So,
Uh-huh.
brother created a channel for Michael Vick and his Norfolk State Spartans, and it's growing, man. Let me get that. I'ma mention the channel, Fair Use YouTube, but yeah, he's done brought like people like Dre Bly, um, you know, all pro corner and mainly special teams, and to talk with the
But the way JB talking, he sucks as a defensive back coach at in UNC.
but you know what? Can I be looking back at it?
Uh-huh.
That our defensive backfield did not never change even when we fired Dre Bly.
All
So
right.
we passed it. We Dre Bly was basically the sacrificial lamb.
Mm-mm.
So that was just North Carolina's fault. They should have did better in the recruiting and the coaching. But anyway, um, but yeah, things seem. Notice I said seem because they still them boys still have to put on the helmet in the pass and play
Mm-hmm.
um to see if they're any good. But as far as chemistry and players gelling, everything seems to be good on Norfolk State. Um, Now Delaware State, I haven't seen anything but a lot of interviews from Deshaun Jackson. Looks like he's comfortable being the head coach. Um, it's gonna be interesting, man. And like I gave you the question about Terrell Buckley um and the SWAC. Same question. How you think Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson's gonna do?
Well, honestly, I think one thing we didn't point out in terms of Mike Vick. Michael Vick he's from Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
He's a legend, high school football legend in Virginia. And where he's from, like Newport News, like him, Allen Iverson, uh, shucks, somebody else. My former head coach for not him, former head coach, former quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, Aaron Brooks.
Aaron Brooks, yeah.
Aaron Brooks, Mike Vick, Allen Iverson. They kind of all from this same area. So that's Mike Vick's connection to Norfolk State. Whereas Jay Good pointed this out when it came to Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson in his playing career, he's more synonymous with his time playing for the Eagles. Whereas even though Mike Vick played for the Eagles, he's more synonymous with his time at playing for the Atlanta Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
So you know where the Philly is not that far from Delaware State. So that's Deshaun Jackson's connection to Delaware State. Honestly, I think just them having those type of ties to those particular institutions, I think it kind of gives them a little bit of a competitive advantage.
And
Uh,
then he got all, and I just want to interject that, like, I hope what you just said didn't go over a lot of people's head, man. Michael Vick is from that area, like Newport News and all them. So even even though they rivals that Hampton area, so he got access to all that talent.
yeah,
And people who know about like people like KG, who's from that Virginia area. Shout out to Cadillac Red and all them boys, man. But those who know that Newport News, Hampton, all that area is loaded with talent in football. So just by his name, he can attract a lot of talent to Norfolk State.
and speaking of just attracting talent, you got to realize too, you know, uh, Deshaun Jackson, when he first took over at Delaware State, like he brought in a lot of like 4 and 5 star receivers. So I don't
Mm,
know how that's going
there
to
you go.
I don't know how that's going to translate over onto the field, but I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic with those two. And like I said, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's a difference between Deshaun Jackson and Michael Vick, and I'm gonna say kind of Eddie George Deion Sanders in terms of coming at HBCU. Whereas if you look at Chris Dishman, no disrespect to Chris Dishman, but I felt like he was the compromise where Fred McNair was on one end of the spectrum in terms of, hey, I'm a SWAC lifer. I done won two SWAC championships. I done been to two Celebration Bowls.
Hmm.
Whereas Andre Johnson, NF perennial All Pro, played for the Houston Texans for years, but I don't have no coaching experience. Chris Dishman kind of was like the meat in the middle. He was a compromise. Hey, I was an All Pro for the Houston Oilers, and I have coaching experience. I'm kind of the meat in the middle. Whereas I felt like if you're gonna go, first of all, you had already promised Fred McNair a job. I think Fred McNair, he kind of overplayed his hand in terms of trying to leverage Texas Southern against Alcorn State. He kind of overplayed his hand. But in terms of Andre Johnson, some board members wanted Andre Johnson, some wanted Fred McNair. But it had to be a consensus vote. And Chris Dishman was the only one that got all of the votes. But even with that being said, I think, and that's not another thing too, even though he played for the Oilers for some years, man, these kids nowadays not gonna know no dog Chris Dishman. They know
Right.
Andre Johnson. I don't think they're gonna know Chris Dishman. And again, Vic played for the Falcons. Deshaun Jackson played for the Eagles. They both played for the Eagles. You know, those two gonna resonate. Terrell Buckley, even though he a Mississippi high school legend, I don't know if he really gonna resonate with, especially at Valley. That's gonna be a hard sell to him. So at the end of the day, I think Mike Vick and Deshaun Jackson, they're in a better situation than Chris Dishman or even Terrell Buckley, especially Terrell Buckley. Terrell Buckley has a steep hill, steep mountain to climb, whereas I think Mike Vick, Deshaun Jackson, I'm not saying they have the same type of charisma or personality as a Deion Sanders, but even if they do what Eddie George did at Tennessee State, I think they're gonna be in a good position.
Okay. I 100% agree. I believe they're going to be in a good position. They may have a slow start in their first year, trying to gel everybody together, continue to gel everyone together. But I believe it's gonna pay off.
And that's one thing I want people to realize too. Just bringing a bunch of like 4 and 5 star players to the institution. That's not gonna be the magic elixir to turn your program around right away. Because people don't realize they talk about all the success he had at Jackson State. Hey, that spring after COVID, and Jackson State was getting their head kicked in. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't until that fall he brought in Shador, and things kind of started to turn around, and then it turned around even more when he brought in Travis Hunter. You know that type of thing. So he brought in more dogs as he progressed. He didn't just turn it all around in his first go at it.
Facts, man. Facts, man. But I hope these gentlemen do well in being head coaches of the new teams. But it's gonna be exciting to see, man.
Yeah, big
Um,
time.
but moving on to the main topic, and we're gonna wrap everything up. Uh, is the MEAC in danger? Is the MEAC in danger? Those who don't know, and coach, I have coach here to get the background of what's going on. Um, the MEAC may be in danger of collapsing, meaning that um, the conference may have to liquidate or be no more, and the teams that were in the MEAC have to move on to other conferences, or maybe move down to Division Two. Um, Coach, what's going on, man?
Well, this is what's going on. Shout out to the Jaguar Journal, Perry White. He talked about this on his platform. He brought Scotty on from Off Script, and basically, what transpired is after the recent, you know, March Madness NCAA tournament, a lot of the the faithful of Howard University, they were not content with the arrangement of the MEAC tournament in terms of at Norfolk. From a financial standpoint, it was beneficial. But they're looking at the SWAC y'all playing in Atlanta, and the CIAA tournament is a big thing every year in terms of being a big weekend in terms of the CIAA tournament. So they're looking at like, hey, why can't we be in a beneficial situation? We really don't like the setup with Norfolk. So they complained, and then eventually, you got some rumblings from North Carolina Central, and
Mm,
those two particular institutions are talking about withdrawing from the MEAC.
mm,
And the MEAC already took a blow when Hampton and Tennessee State left and went to a PWI conference. They didn't go to an HBCU conference like the SWAC. No. They went to a PWI conference.
mm.
So they went to a PWI conference, and then the SWAC was able to pull Bethune-Cookman and FAMU. And people don't realize, like, FAMU and Southern is we always talk about who is Southern's biggest rival. At a
Mhm.
certain point, it's Grambling. Another point is Jackson State. Another point is Alcorn State. But at one point, their biggest rival was FAMU. And part of that was the SWAC versus MEAC. But now you brought FAMU and Bethune into the SWAC. Of course, both of those are Florida institutions. But nevertheless, you was able to bring both of them into the SWAC. So, so you got, you know, Tennessee State and Hampton leaving. You really can't afford for Howard. You really can't afford for Howard, and you can't afford for Howard and North Carolina Central to leave. I'm sorry, Howard. Yeah, Howard and North Carolina Central, and
Mhm.
now it's starting to be a little bit of rumblings with South Carolina State. Not only that, they ended up hiring a new, they ended up hiring a new like commissioner, in terms of the person in charge of the MEAC. A couple of the institutions are really not content with, they're not content with the hire that they made that's over the MEAC. And my bad. No, well, my bad. You right, Desmond Allen. It was Hampton and Savannah State, but at one point, Tennessee State talked about going to the MEAC, but they never went. But yeah, you right on that. You right, Desmond
Yeah,
Allen. That's
he
my.
is.
But the point I was trying to make is you got all of these rumblings with Howard and North Carolina Central talking about leaving now. South Carolina State is kind of on the fence. Basically, you can't have any more institutions withdraw from the MEAC because if you do, then it's gonna collapse. From what I'm understanding, like other conferences are like courting, a couple of these MEAC schools. Even CIAA, is trying to, court a couple of them. So they really can't afford. For they can't afford to lose two more institutions because they already bare as it is.
Mhm.
And a lot of institutions in the MEAC, in particular, Howard and North Carolina Central, like they don't feel like the conference has any vision. It doesn't have any foresight. Like they should have been able to bring in a couple more institutions, even if they had to hate to say it, you go rate the CIAA or you go rate a couple of these Division II HBCUs and you bring them into your conference. Like you need more institutions in your conference. So
Mm.
so
Look
that's the
what
thing about it.
look
They
what
feel
Desmond
like,
Allen put, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Coach, because it's a good question, guys. Do you think the MEAC is being whitewashed?
hey, hey, that's a good question, Desmond Allen. Because to be truthful, I hate to say it, these PWIs, they have in some instances, not in all, but in a couple instances, they have enough foresight to realize that, hey, either we got to bring in a couple of these HBCUs, we need more bodies. That's just like at one point. I had this football team, and I only had like 15 players, whereas I'm playing against teams that got 36, 32, 45, and we were at a competitive disadvantage every game because we had so few players. So in this context, the MEAC needs more bodies, and the fact that they don't have enough foresight to realize, hey, we need to go recruit a couple of these institutions. And these PWIs, they were like, hey, the HBCUs, like we don't care. We need more. We need more institutions in our conference. So hey, they went and got two HBCUs. To me, it's blasphemous that you got two HBCUs doing a PWI conference. And I think to a certain degree, I think the MEAC is being whitewashed. And the
Yeah,
thing that the MEAC doesn't realize, they're vulnerable right now. So
yeah.
instead of you saying, hey, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna recruit like maybe four HBCUs on the Division II level or whatever the case may be, you need to bring in who you need to bring in, or even if you need to go talk to FAMU and Bethune to try to bring them back to the MEAC, like you need to do whatever you need to do to get more bodies
Or
to
bring up
position
some of
Black.
like we talked over offline. Bring up some of the Division II schools like Allen or Central, um, or Savannah State. Bring up those or a Tuskegee. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing about it. These are institutions that Southern has been kind of synonymous for playing in the Peterson Classic. But, you know, of course, Southern kind of beat the brakes off of these type of teams. But even if you look at Savannah State, when no one was in the game, guess what? Southern struggled against Savannah State.
Right.
And I mean, they were losing until they decided, hey, you know what, no, we sick of you at this point. Come on, Zay, come in the game. Till Zay came in the game, Southern was losing to Savannah State, you know. And not only that, but we're gonna get to Desmond Allen point in a minute, but not only that, but I remember one year Southern played against Tuskegee. Of course, they beat the brakes off of Tuskegee. But like you said, Tuskegee, you and I talked about this behind the scenes. Like Tuskegee is a scrappy school. I mean, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like, I hate to say it. I think if you put Catholic High against Tuskegee, it might be a good fight. So, they're not on the
Right.
same level with SWAC or MEAC schools, but at the same token, if you bring them up, if you give them more resources, at some point I think they could be a player. And that's why I asked you guys that because me and Carlos Brown was talking about how North Carolina A&T were complaining about their white AD, and that's another thing too. Like, Desmond Allen know I'm kind of fervent about this. When Alcorn State, even though they won the SWAC with him, having a white head coach, I was anti that. Of course, some Alcorn State fans were like, "Hey, we want to SWAC," and I don't give a damn, bro. Like, I feel like there's only a limited amount of athletic director positions. There's only a limited amount of head coaching positions. We already not getting our fair shake in the NFL and at PWI Power Five. So you're gonna take an AD job and give it to a white person. You're gonna take a head coaching job and give it to a white person. Man, the hell with that. We HBCUs for a reason. Like, so you're gonna take a head coaching job away from a black guy and give it to a white guy. Oh, hey, we don't care about race. We just care about the best person for the job. Man, F that, bro. So, as far as I'm concerned, every HBCU should have a black head coach in every sport, and you should have a black athletic director. Point blank, bottom line, period. Supposed to have played North Carolina A&T in the MEAC SWAC Challenge and a couple years ago, but they were out the MEAC the year we were supposed to play them. Yeah, I remember that. And the crazy thing about it is, you have these type of situations, and the white AD thing that Desmond Allen brought up, like that's a legit point. But I'm not gonna lie, I really think behind the scenes, whether Desmond Allen made it in this way or not, I think some of these PWI conferences trying to recruit some of these MEAC schools because at this point it's all about bodies. You know what I'm saying? And whether it's having a white AD, having white PWI conferences trying to recruit MEAC schools to come to their conference. Like, I think to a certain degree, I think the MEAC is being whitewashed.
Hmm. Okay. And one more question, and we also talked about this offline. So if let's say if the MEAC is does collapse, what will happen with the SWAC at the end of the year for the top team, that SWAC team that comes out on top after the in the East versus West game, and whoever's the SWAC champion, and or whatever SWAC team that's ranked in the FCS, instead of playing the top MEAC school for the Celebration Bowl, if the MEAC conference is liquidated, doesn't that mean that they will have to go into the FCS playoffs?
Essentially, that's what it would amount. Well, I'm not gonna lie. I think in that instance, all of those MEAC schools, they would join other conferences. So
Mm-hmm.
just say if you Howard and you North Carolina Central and South Carolina State, you might CIAA might recruit you. You might go down to Division 2, which I doubt, or you could go to another PWI conference. I'm gonna be honest with you. Some people might say, "Yeah, it can happen." Bro, I'm not gonna lie. I think it might be too many teams for the SWAC to take on the entire MEAC. So this will be the issue you face because I'm well versed in this aspect of it, and in the mid to late '90s, but no, let me phrase it: the early to late '90s, like we know Southern and Grambling, they automatically forfeit their right to play in the FCS or the 1AA playoffs because the
Mm-hmm.
Bayou Classic is the same weekend that the 1AA playoff starts, right? So people always used to ask, well, like, why Southern and Grambling don't move the Bayou Classic up a week because to play in the 1AA playoffs? The reason why is because people don't realize this. You have to pay to play in the FCS or the 1AA playoff. Whereas even if Southern or Grambling was to get in the 1AA playoffs and go all the way through and win a championship, it would be more financially beneficial for them to play in the Bayou Classic because that one weekend in New Orleans, you're going to make more money playing in the Bayou Classic than you got to pay to play in the 1AA playoffs. And not only that, but you gotta have room and board for your players. You gotta get travel accommodations. So if anything, you won't be coming out and losing. In whereas if you play in a Bayou Classic, it's a big money game. And there's been so many years I will watch the 1AA or the FCS playoffs, and shit, you can play 3 games. You can play one game on one side of the stadium, another game on the other side of the stadium, and a game on the field. Whereas, especially when the Bayou Classic was hot, like extremely hot, like hotter than fish grease in the late '90s, man, guess what? You know, the Superdome is packed to capacity. Everywhere you go in New Orleans that weekend is a big deal. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, that's the reason why Southern and Grambling never played in the 1AA playoff. But this was the issue, though. Outside of Southern and Grambling, you know, whether it was Jackson State, because remember Jackson State played in the 1AA playoffs one year. Alcorn State, even when they had Steve Aaron McNair as the quarterback, they played against a big PWI in round 1, and they ended up losing the first round. McNair played good, but he threw some interceptions, this, that, and the third. They ended
Mm-hmm.
up getting blown out and bounced in the first round. Even though it started off well, they ended up getting smacked. They ended up losing. So at that time, if it wasn't Southern or Grambling, a SWAC school would play in the 1AA playoffs. The top school in the SWAC besides Southern and Grambling, in the top school in the MEAC. Then the Celebration Bowl came in the interception, right? So this is what happened with that. When you bring the Celebration Bowl in, the top team from the SWAC play against the top team from the MEAC. So the Heritage Bowl, people don't realize that Heritage Bowl and the Celebration Bowl, it was Youngstown State. You're right. I couldn't remember the team. This was like '94 or whatever. But the top team in the SWAC played against the top team in the MEAC in the Heritage Bowl, right? And it was a big deal at that time because it would be, of course, this bowl season for ESPN, and of course ESPN was covering it. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a big time. And Southern always traveled well. especially in that time. Southern still travels well, but not to the degree they did in those like early to late 90s. So Southern played in the Heritage Bowl, especially they played against FAMU. FAMU was and Southern were huge rivals. I remember one year like 95, 95, 96. I was like a sophomore, junior high school. This was between Christmas and New Year's. Southern played against South Carolina State in the Heritage Bowl, and we went. But the issue the Heritage Bowl started having was if Southern wasn't playing in it, or certain MEAC schools, if Southern in like FAMU wasn't playing in it, or like a school like maybe Jackson State or whoever, if teams that didn't draw well didn't play in the Heritage Bowl, it wasn't a big enough crowd and it wasn't enough attention. And this is another issue that they started having. So what they started doing was, you know, one team from the SWAC would go to one WA playoff, one team from the MEAC. But since the top team from the SWAC was going to the Heritage Bowl, what the MEAC started doing, they started sending their top two teams to the one WA playoffs. So, they would send their top two teams to the one WA playoffs. And then, so at this point, now Pete Richardson, he aggravated because he was like, look, we're in a no-win situation. The top team from the SWAC playing against the third team in the MEAC, one of those two teams is going to automatically win the Black National Championship because they're playing in the 1AA playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And if we win, we really don't gain nothing because we beating up on a third place team. And then not only that, if we lose, we get upset. We have egg on our face because, we got upset by the third place team. So interest started waning in the Celebration Bowl. I'm sorry, the Heritage Bowl. Interest started waning in the Heritage Bowl, and it ended up dissolving. And Pete Richardson felt like it was a no-win situation. If we Southern, we go play against Bethune or whoever. I remember one year, I think they lost to Howard, if I'm not mistaken. They had beat the same team earlier on in the season, and the MEAC sent the top two teams to the 1AA playoffs, and you ended up losing to a team that you blew out early in the same season. So they dissolved it, and then what ended up happening was, since Southern since the SWAC had enough teams, they ended up forming the SWAC championship. And initially, they were playing a neutral site like Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah, it was Hampton in '99. They ended up playing in Birmingham, Alabama, and you would look at the crowd because we were supposed to go to the first SWAC championship game when Southern played against Jackson State, but for whatever reason, senior we didn't go. I don't know, something up came up, whatever. We didn't go. Of course, we always would go to at least two Southern away games. We had season tickets to this day. We still haven't go all up Southern home games. So Southern and Jackson State played in the SWAC championship. It ended up being a huge thing. Then it got to a point where, the SWAC, they start moving the SWAC championship game around. And I remember one year they played in Houston when Southern and Jackson State played in Houston in 2013. That ended up being a big deal too. But what ended up happening is the Celebration Bowl ended up coming back. And then, of course, the thing about it after COVID, what ended up happening was the SWAC ended up going to, instead of having neutral site games, instead of having those neutral site games, what they would do is the home team, whoever had the better record or the better standing between the SWAC East school and the SWAC West school, that school would host a SWAC championship game, and they would collect the whole pot. So it was more beneficial to that SWAC team that had the home game for the SWAC championship. So instead of you dividing the money, you get the whole pot. And then take it to the next level. We're just going to say, for example, we're going to say Southern in 2025. If Southern was to win, Southern playing the Bayou Classic and win. First of all, Southern and Grambling making a lot of money that weekend. So that's a big win for Southern. Then you turn around and you go to the SWAC championship game and you host the SWAC championship game at A.W. Mumford Stadium, Pete Richardson Field. You get all of that money, you collect the whole pot, and you win it. Then you turn around and you go to the Celebration Bowl and you beat, I don't know, we're going to say North Carolina Central. Man, hey, you had 3 killer weekends where you made a boatload of money. And you able to not only from a prestige standpoint, take your institution to another level. But from a financial standpoint, you take your institution to another level. But the issue is if the MEAC collapses, then what you gonna do with the Celebration Bowl? You have no
Right.
Celebration Bowl. So Southern and Grambling gonna make off good Value Classic weekend, and whoever hosts the SWAC championship game, they make off good that weekend. Because they host the SWAC championship game, they get the whole pot. But that Celebration Bowl money, that's big money. So that's part of the reason why, if you look at a team like Jackson State, that's why they kind of been able to grow, because they hosted the SWAC championship game those 2 years. And then, of course, you playing against Southern. That's a huge rivalry. So you're able to collect that whole pot. Then you turn around and you go to the Celebration Bowl and you get more money. Man, you collecting cheese. So that's money that's going to be off the table. You're not going to have the ESPN money at your disposal, or whatever, whoever have the rights for that particular game, Celebration Bowl. Like, you losing out on money if the MEAC collapses and you no longer have that big money game to play in. So whether you Southern, whether you Jackson State, like, it's beneficial for you to have that game to go to. Whereas if we're just gonna say, the SWAC school at this point, the SWAC, they kind of all in with the SWAC championship game because it's a big money deal. Just like the Bayou Classic is a big money deal for Southern and Grambling, SWAC championship game is a big money deal. But that Celebration Bowl, even for that MEAC team, if you're a MEAC team, you leave and you leave the MEAC to go to, I don't know, the CIAA. Guess what? Hey, I'd rather play in the Celebration Bowl and get big cheese. Or even if you join another PWI and you go play in the FCS playoffs, you got to pay to play in the FCS playoffs, as opposed to you collecting a big check to go play on ESPN or ABC, Cricket Wireless, whatever your sponsor is for the Celebration Bowl. That's a big money deal. So it's beneficial for the SWAC if the MEAC is still in existence and you
Yes.
have a team to play against that weekend. And especially if you win, man, you getting big money. You winning off the field and you winning on the field. And even if you don't win, like, it kind of raises the profile of your institution. So you definitely want that money at your disposal. You don't want the MEAC conference to go away and you lose out on that money.
I agree, man. It definitely will um, lose out on all that money that happened on that weekend in Atlanta. So, um, man, I really hope this doesn't happen, but we'll see. We'll see. Um, but Coach, man, I'm excited. We got an installment of a special episode
The Southern
of
Baller Show.
of the Southern Baller Show
Well,
that is
let
featuring.
me rephrase it. An HBCU Fanatic version of the Southern Baller Show.
You beat me
I'm
to what
sorry,
I was about to say.
a special HBCU Fanatics edition of the Southern Baller Show. So,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
so I know some people will be like, man, Coach, this is HBCU Fanatics. Well, technically, I'm his co-host on the Southern Baller Show. He my co-host on HBCU Fanatics. So either way the cut go, we still, we like hand in glove. We go hand in hand anyway. You know what I'm saying? But
Yes,
it's a
sir.
special HBCU Fanatics edition of the Southern Baller Show for those
Yes,
that
sir.
it makes sense.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I appreciate it. Just coming up talking about HBCU ball and what's been going on, but excited for the season. We're going to try to have another episode, whether it's on Coach's channel or my channel, it don't matter. We're going to try to bring it to you when we're free or not bogged down with obligations. But Coach, let everybody know how they can meet you and see you.
You can meet me and see me at Coach 67 Sports TV on all social media platforms. However, I am primarily here on YouTube at Coach 67 Sports TV. As you and I talked about earlier, today was the 2025 Southern University Blue versus Gold Spring game. I have something major coming on the backside of this Blue versus Gold Spring game. So come to my channel, stay tuned. And not only that, for all those individuals that came and watched the special edition of the Southern Baller Show, man, y'all got to come on back tomorrow and catch a regular installment of the Southern Baller Show.
Yes,
We're
sir.
going to talk about a variety of different sports topics. And, we have these kind of conversations every Sunday here on this channel, 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Y'all to come check us out, Southern Baller Show. But for all of those that's following me on my channel, Coach 67 Sports TV, got something major playing on the backside of this 2025 Southern University Blue versus Gold Spring game.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Y'all, please check the brother out. Be on the lookout for whatever special uh, installment he got. So make sure y'all have your notifications up. Make sure it's on because YouTube be tripping.
Yeah,
But yes, also 3:30 tomorrow we're gonna have another episode of the regular Southern Baller Show. So
yes,
y'all
sir.
stay tuned.
Oh,
But go ahead.
and let me plug your other show too. We didn't do it these last couple of Saturdays, but every few weeks we do this show on this channel called The Black Man's Perspective.
Yes, sir.
A lot of good, dope conversation in terms of much needed conversation in terms of the black community. As soon as we get the general of this phenomenal organization that we are part of, as soon as we can all get back on the same page, we're gonna come back to Black Man's Perspective, episode 3. So hopefully we get it all on the right page. Next Saturday,
Yeah, because our
10:30
schedules.
Central
Yeah.
Standard Time. Y'all to come check us out with Black Man's Perspective.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But y'all have a blessed Saturday night. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Saturday night. Y'all be easy.
Peace and blessings.